Welcome to Jobbed Out, the wrestling editorial that reminds you that once people really hated Trish Stratus, even declaring she didn't belong in a wrestling ring. But look how that turned out. Previously, I had re-uploaded a piece on the life and career of Mildred Burke, a true pioneer in wrestling and one of the many victims of a monster who mastered the art of burying other, better talents. No, not that one. Not that one either. I'm talking about the Fabulous Moolah. Now, when I had mentioned this on my old channel, the response was actually pretty mixed. This was before the WWE tried to do the Fabulous Moolah Memorial Women's Battle Royal, and a lot of people weren't yet talking about Moolah's attempts to keep an entire industry down so that she could sit atop of it. In fact, when the Battle Royal news had taken place, I was contacted about my piece to make a statement and offer up my sources. Sadly, that convo is long gone since Freak Nitro TV was deleted in 2017, but the word was out. So have a listen. Now don't get me wrong, this isn't going to be an episodic where every edition focuses on the life and career of one particular person. Though I do like the idea of doing biographical editorials, but rather I want to set the scene for what women had to endure in the industry before they were the 6-minute bathroom break before your John Cena main event. I'll be giving better examples of that in the next editorial, but I still have some unfinished business for this one. Something I got called out for was my statement about the Fabulous Moolah. To put it bluntly, I called her a piece of shit and a monster. This caught quite a few people off guard, because, well, she's the grandmother of pro wrestling. She's a legend and a Hall of Famer, with many of the WWE's key moments in women's wrestling history having something to do with her. Whether it was her WrestleMania moment with Wendy Richter, or the Spider Lady Screwjob, or even the Weird Attitude Era moments with longtime friend Mae Young, who, don't worry, I have all the respect in the world for. We all know that part, because that's the part of history that was written down. And we all know that history is written with the bias of the winners. Today, though, I want to talk about some of the things the Fabulous Moolah took part in that should make you cringe. Moolah, real name Mary Ellison, had dealt with a fair share of tragedy when she was a kid. Her mom passed away when she was 8. She worked in a cotton farm to make ends meet. She got married at the age of 14 to a 21-year-old with she had a daughter. Don't worry, it wasn't considered taboo back then. At 15, though, she was divorced. To deal with the loss of her mom, her dad would take her along to wrestling shows, and that's where she first set her eyes on Mildred Burke. And you were wondering why I had to start the series there, eh? In time, Moolah began training with Billy Wolf. Yes, that Billy Wolf. The slimy, womanizing, cheating on his wife with the women he trained and managed Billy Wolf. Thankfully, Moolah wasn't in the mood. She was not having it, and minus a romance with trainer Johnny Long, they eventually got married by the way, she refused to exchange sexual favors in order to get work. Now you would think with that kind of integrity I'd have nicer things to say about her, right? Well, keep listening. After a successful valet run as Slave Girl Moolah, including a time when she was even managing Nature Boy Buddy Rogers, which ended because, well, she refused to sleep with him for a paycheck. She began working for Vince McMahon Sr., who dubbed her the Fabulous Moolah. A good chunk of the rest is history, including her historic title runs and the Spider Lady Screwjob. If you're not familiar with that one, you need to go do a YouTube search right now. Just pause this video, I'll wait. The short of it, though, is if you really can't be bothered to look it up, WWF Women's Champion Wendy Richter was regularly arguing with Vince McMahon Jr. over pay issues, and that Moolah was brought in to wrestle Richter under a mask at Madison Square Garden. During the match, the Spider Lady started working stiff with Richter and, at one point, rolls Richter into a small package. The ref very quickly made a 3 count even though Richter kicked out at 1. Richter left the WWF not long after, and, well, she didn't return until 2012, 5 years after Moolah passed away. Now I know you can argue that she was just doing her job, she had to do it, except Moolah and Richter had more of a past and it extended farther back than you'd think. Depending on who you ask, the Fabulous Moolah actually trained Wendy Richter. And the reason I say that is because, well, Richter paid Moolah to train her, but Moolah didn't actually train people. Rather, the women in her stable trained each other.
Leilani Kai, Joyce Gable, Junie Martin, they worked with each other at no compensatory pay while Moolah collected their fees. That's like paying Shaq to teach you to play basketball, but he just lets the kids scrimmage on his driveway. Oh, it gets worse though. You see, Moolah had a stranglehold on these women. They signed contracts that would make your hearts weep. All signees had to move onto her property, pay rent, utilities, groceries, etc. And then she would get them bookings, if she liked them. Of course, for 25% of their payday, not including deductions, travel, expenses. Basically, if you were paid $100 at a show, Moolah would find a way so that you owed her $110. Slave girl Moolah becomes slave owner Moolah. Oh, but it gets worse. You'll find I'm saying that a lot in this episode. You see, if women wanted to work, they had to play along. Because Moolah owned them. Leilani Kai even stated in interviews that promoters wouldn't pay the girls directly. Rather, they gave pay packets to Moolah, who would take her cut, plus a little extra, before passing the envelopes on to the women who actually did the work. This would be illegal if anybody dared to speak up, but of course, if you spoke up against Moolah, who had the WWF behind her, you simply never worked again. Guess what? It gets worse. You see, Moolah controlled these women, and I do mean controlled. In the following years, people like Wendy Richter, Ida Martinez, Sweet Georgia Brown, even Luna Vachon, who I will not hide my childhood crush for, had stepped forward with stories of Moolah pimping them out to promoters. And I mean that in the most literal way. These girls would work, and then the promoters would withhold pay until extra services were completed. Oh, and Moolah knew about it. You see, it turns out Moolah, who was so strongly against exchanging sexual services for a payday, was really only against exchanging her sexual services to men for a payday. She was perfectly fine offering 16-year-old Luna Vachon's sexual services to men for a payday, or offering lesbian wrestler Sandy Parker's sexual services to men for a payday. It takes a special kind of monster to make slave ownership the less despicable thing on your resume. There were a couple of stories about career sabotage, but let's face it, you can't really top forced prostitution when it comes to the piece of shit meter. The public truth is the Fabulous Moolah was a pioneer. She was a strong, serious women's wrestler whose legacy is immortalized in 3 Pro Wrestling Hall of Fames. The sad truth is she was a pimp, a thief, a slave owner, and a piece of shit that set women's lib and gender equality back 30 years. She will be remembered as the face of women's wrestling because she did so much to oppress the other women around her. And if I'm ever in Columbia, South Carolina, I hope people forgive me for spitting on her tombstone, because she doesn't deserve the praise for floating atop a field of people that she forcefully drowned underneath her. Now stay tuned for episode 3, where I discuss the second big bang of women's wrestling, the rise of the valet, and the story of Miss Elizabeth.
Now, as I mentioned, in 2018, the WWE tried to launch the Fabulous Moolah Memorial Battle Royal for WrestleMania, and Twitter tore it to shreds. Wrestlers started speaking out, some of which I had actually mentioned in my piece, and there were even some people who came to Moolah's defense. Now, I'm still a heavy believer of just because they were nice to you doesn't mean they weren't a piece of shit to others. I mean, even Hitler had a dog. The WWE eventually reneged on the decision and just had the annual Women's Battle Royal attached to no names. Personally, I'm still in the camp of calling it the Sensational Sherry Invitational. I did get asked about if we should be shaming Mae Young as well, and it's kinda still hard to say. People haven't been as outspoken about her. In fact, Mae Young is hands down more beloved than Moolah ever was, all the way until the day she died. But we don't know how she acted during these events. Should we be mad at her? I'm not. I'm still mad at Moolah. The big difference between the two? We actually do know what Fabulous Moolah did. Similarly, we've been finding out little by little about what Hogan would do, or Trips, or Cena in their desperate attempts to hold their spots at the top. Thankfully, at least for now, none of them can compare to the monster who held an entire gender back for 40 years. That's it for now, though. So I want to pose this question. If you hadn't heard this before, if you hadn't known about all the talk of what the Fabulous Moolah had done over the course of her career, does this change your opinion of her? Does this make you want to read more into it and come to your own conclusion? Or are you a Fabulous Moolah fan through and through? All three counts? Let me know why in the comments. For now, though, I better get my shoulders off the mat, so thank you for tuning in to Jobbed Out. I'll catch you next time.